You're listening to the How in the World podcast, where we tackle global issues and discuss how we as Christians can make a lasting difference. My name is Rini Charest, and I pastor in the heart of the Central Valley in beautiful California. I'll be sitting down with guests from every walk of life to discover innovative ways that we can make an impact. This is the How in the World podcast. Hey, Rini Charest at How in the World podcast, as we talk about things that happen all over the world. And today my special guest is Danielle McEntee, who happens to be my daughter. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
We're actually filming this in Montana, not in my studio, and because she moved here to get a special kind of license, the midwifery license.
You said it right.
I called it midwifery, but my granddaughter corrected me. And first of all, why isn't it called midwifery?
I don't know what that word was. Why wasn't it called midwifery? I don't know. That's a good question. We'll look into that.
Okay, you're really close. Like you're leaning forward and she's sitting back.
Oh,
Okay.
It looks kind of
I'll sit up straighter.
Yeah.
How about that?
okay.
There you go. It's also the camera's turned sideways. Hey, Rini Charest here. Welcome to How in the World podcast, where we talk about things that happen all over the world. And today I'm actually in Montana with my daughter, Danielle McEntee, and she came here for a special purpose. Tell them about why you moved to Montana.
Well, Montana has a school called the Modules of Midwifery. And if you don't know what the word midwifery means, it is a woman who helps women during her pregnancy and helps them to deliver babies, sometimes in the hospital. I am studying to become a certified professional midwife for home birth. And the word midwife, actually, if you take it back to the roots, means just with women. So I get to be with women and serve women through pregnancy, labor, and in the early stages when their babies are first born, to help them with nursing and all that other kind of stuff.
Now, for thousands of years, women have acted as midwives. And then in just the last couple hundred years, women go to hospitals to have babies. So why did that happen? Because now the latest statistic is 10% of all births in first world countries are delivered by midwives. Why is that?
Well, you're right. When women used to give birth for thousands of years, it was something that you just passed on. The women would just traditionally, the men weren't really involved. The mothers would teach their daughters how to deliver babies, and they would be in the same room as their aunts having babies and their grandmothers. Well, the grandmothers weren't having babies, of course, but they were teaching their daughters. And so it was just this thing that women did, that they would teach one another, and it was passed down from generation to generation. And so the women didn't really have formal education. They weren't going to nursing school or anything like that. They just knew instinctively and from experience and from what was passed down generationally what to do, because the body will pretty much do what it needs to do. It doesn't really need our help most of the time. But doctors kind of became involved. Early 19th century was when they really, really, really started doing more hospital births. And the main reason was because women were afraid they were going to die, and didn't like the pain. I don't blame them. Back in the day, lots of women died from childbirth just because they didn't have any medical wherewithal to know how to do a cesarean or how to administer something simple like antibiotics, for example. So when doctors came into the picture, they really were helpful in many ways, but they were unhelpful in some ways, as far as saying, oh, these midwives, they're not formally educated. They don't know anything. People shouldn't trust them. People should trust us because we're doctors. So some of that was popular because lives were being saved and women were being administered drugs. They weren't feeling the pain quite as much. So it took some fear and it took some pain away. Well, those are good things. But when you intervene with medical intervention too much, that can be a problem too. So then that takes you into the years of the twilight sleep, which was essentially just knocking women out so they could pry the babies out with forceps. And that was harmful to the women and the babies, not only physically, but a lot of times the women wouldn't even remember their birth afterwards because the drugs were so potent. They wouldn't remember anything about the birth. They would be foggy. Those early bonding moments that are so important with a newborn, those were non-existent. And they would also have trouble breastfeeding. And then the doctor said, breastfeeding's not good, feed your baby formula. Well, whatever God put in your body to naturally give your baby, I would say is probably the thing that you should try first before anything else. So that kind of just was a downward spiral at that point. Doctors are wonderful. There's a myth that midwives and doctors don't like each other. And that's just really, in some cases, that's true. There's animosity. But really, we're supposed to work together with physicians because, yes, medical intervention can make labor worse in many instances. I had an experience like that. But we are also really thankful for doctors in case of emergency. So I think, back to your question, why numbers are going up again. This year, certainly we saw tons of numbers of home birth go up because of COVID, because women didn't want to give birth in a hospital alone. A lot of spouses weren't allowed in the room. A lot of women were forced to labor wearing masks. If you've ever been in labor and you've had to breathe and then you think about wearing a mask, I think that's torturous for a laboring mother. But in the last 10 years, I think more women have just realized they have a choice in the matter, that if they're low risk and they don't have any pre-existing conditions or contraindications or anything like that, they can give birth at home with a either certified professional midwife or a certified nurse midwife and be perfectly safe.
So how many are there? How many certified midwives are there in the United States?
I don't know. I have no idea how many there are.
Okay.
You could look it up on...
let's say someone says, you know what, I think that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. What do they do? How long does it take? How much
to
schooling?
become a midwife?
Yeah.
There's a couple paths you could take. You could either become a certified nurse midwife, which is more of a medical track where you would go to nursing school and you would become a nurse that specializes in midwifery. And then the path that I'm taking is a certified professional midwife. So it's a nationally certified certification. And what it is there's classes that you take, either online or in person. You can choose your midwifery school. And then you would do a apprenticeship. So you'd find a woman who was a midwife who was certified to be a preceptor, and you would train under her through all 3 phases of the National Association of Registered Midwives. And once you completed all those phases, then you would take the test. It's like the bar exam, but for midwives. And you would become a certified nurse midwife or certified professional midwife. And then you can be licensed in your state, whatever state you have. Every state has different qualifications. You would become licensed in the state that you're going to practice in.
Now, we have quite a few people that we're going to be interviewing on the podcast that are missionaries. And you said there's a lot of folks, a lot of women going through this who choose to be missionaries. And so explain that whole process, why they're doing that.
Yeah, well, the answer really is simple. In a lot of these developing countries, they just don't have the resources that they need, like we do in the States or even in some places in Europe. And actually, the United States does home births and midwives a lot less than other countries in Europe. But in a lot of the developing countries, they don't have the resources. When you think about places like Togo or Africa or Haiti, a lot of them live in the middle of nowhere. So even to get to a hospital could take them 2 hours or days if they have to walk, if they don't have transportation. So a lot of these young women are training to become missionary midwives and serving in these clinics, serving these villages with the education, the tools, and the resource they have. And really, their main goal is to teach the women that live in those communities so that they can serve their communities there. And of course, the West, we have more in as so far as medical technology. So there are little things that maybe having a Doppler to be able to listen to the baby's heart rate, maybe that's no big deal for us, but you get one of those machines into the hands of a woman in the jungles of Togo and she can hear her baby's heart rate, and during labor you can check on the heart rate so you know if there's any issues. That's huge. The biggest problem in developing countries with maternal morbidity and death and newborn death is they don't have good prenatal care. So just in the hands of these women, telling them, this is how you take care of yourself. These are some problems we can kind of nip in the bud right now so that they don't bleed into your labor, and you don't lose your baby, or of course, God forbid, the mother and the child. So just helping with prenatal care and being able to educate and inform and resource them.
Now, a lot of people do have insurances, and they have every intention of having their baby at the hospital, but they also want a midwife. So, and I know in a lot of, not all states, do all states allow midwives to deliver babies, or are there restrictions? And secondly, if a woman wants a midwife to join her in the hospital, can she? And what is the benefit of having a midwife in the process, even though you have insurance and you go to the doctor, you can go to the hospital and have a baby?
Yeah, that a lot of women want home births, but if they are high risk, a midwife will risk them out. In other words, either the state has regulations on what is allowed at home for birth, or the midwife herself will say, for example, I won't deliver a breech baby. I won't deliver twins at home. Or you have high blood pressure. Well, that could very quickly turn to preeclampsia. That's very dangerous. You need to be in a hospital. So if anything goes wrong, we have what we need. And some of those women still want to have a midwife at the hospital. There are some hospitals that actually have midwives, like here in Montana. I have a neighbor and she's a certified nurse midwife, but she works at a hospital doing labor and delivery. Not all states do that. And there are some states where home birth with a midwife is illegal. You can't even do it. It's done, but it's not legal. So there's a lot of underground midwifery in some states in the US still.
Wow.
So if you want a midwife to be there, and let's say she doesn't work at a hospital because she's not a certified nurse midwife, she can act as your doula, which would essentially just be your advocate at the hospital. She would help you through labor. If there are certain things that she wanted, like, I don't want the umbilical cord cut immediately. Well, when you've just had a baby, sometimes you don't have the wherewithal to tell that to the doctors or fight them off if they're being insistent. You would have a doula acting as your advocate, because sometimes the husbands are like, I don't know what to do. I just want to help my wife. So the doula comes in, and you can be a midwife, and you can help them as a doula, but you wouldn't be delivering the baby at that point.
So what are you allowed to do, and what are you not allowed to do? Where do they say, okay, if you are a certified midwife, you are legally allowed to go to this level, but you can't provide services beyond this level? Are there places where you have to stop and say, I can't do this, I can't perform this?
Well, every state's different too. So for example, in Montana, you can only deliver at home up until, I believe it's 40 weeks and a few days or something like that. Like if you go past that number, you have to go to the hospital. You're not allowed to administer intravenous lactated ringers. So you can't do any IV stuff at home. That's just a state law. For midwives in general, what we like to say is we're holistic practice. We're not medical care professionals. We cannot prescribe medicine. In fact, if you do lab work or you want an ultrasound, a midwife can draw your blood and send it to a lab. And a midwife can write up a prescription for you to get an ultrasound at the doctor's. But a midwife can't perform that sort of thing. We can do blood pressure. There's some states you can do IVs. You could administer Pitocin. There's a few things you can do. You deliver the baby, obviously, and you do postpartum care. But anything medical, you can't do as a midwife because you haven't been to medical school. So, yeah, every state's a little bit different in that regard.
So, what are the top 5 myths?
Yeah.
Or the questions you get, you think, oh my gosh,
myths is good too.
1,000 times.
One thing I get a lot when people say you're a midwife, when I say I'm, saying to be a midwife, they're like, there's this thing going around called midwifery. It's a real thing. These women are calling themselves midwitches, and they are women that practice witchcraft and incorporate it into their practice of midwifery.
Wow.
They're out there.
Wow.
So I think everyone always kind of thinks it's a little like witchcrafty in the first place and like hippie and new agey.
Yeah.
And there are those out there, just like with anything. So there is like a very like new agey side to it. And there are midwitches out there. I'm not one of those.
Wow.
I'm
thankful for
and
that.
so it's not new agey to do something that is natural, that God created, that is supposed to happen. I think when it gets into that, that's a different stage, but not all midwives are like that. Another one I said earlier is that midwives hate doctors and doctors hate midwives. I think that's true for some, but for the most part, as a midwife, you want to be friends with your doctors, and they should appreciate you, because what you're doing is giving women an incredible natural experience. And if something goes wrong, you should have a hospital, you should have a place to go, you should have a plan if anything goes awry. What other... I mean, a lot of people think it's dangerous. A lot of people think home birth is not safe.
Well, by the way, there's I don't know if you know who Jim Gaffigan is.
Yes.
He's my favorite comedian, by the way. I think he has 5 kids, and they had them all at home. And people look at him like, oh, so you want to kill your children? And he goes, no, I just didn't want my wife wearing a gown that someone died in the day before in the hospital.
And he didn't want to have to put pants on.
Yeah, right. That's right. He didn't want to have to put pants on. So, I mean, here's a guy that's, he's a national comedian. And his wife obviously loved the experience. And so tell us about your first experience, because you had it, the first one, your first daughter, my granddaughter Lucy, at the hospital. We were there forever. And just talk about
36 hours.
Yeah, that experience as opposed to having the others at home.
Well, my first and biggest mistake with my oldest daughter is that I just did not educate myself. I didn't go to childbirth classes. I thought, people have been doing this for thousands of years. What's the big deal? I can handle this. I didn't learn anything about it. I didn't really take care of myself as well as I should have in diet, nutrition, and exercise. I didn't learn about any pain coping techniques, didn't learn what the protocol was at the hospital, what they were going to do with me, what they were going to do with my baby. I didn't learn any of that. So mistake number 1, and I take responsibility for that. It's a big deal. You should educate and inform yourself so you know what your choices and your rights are. But once I got into the hospital, I didn't know how to cope with the pain. I wasn't prepared for it. And I said I wanted to do it naturally, but I was in pain, and I got some drug administered, I forget what it was, and I was loopy, and that didn't work. So then I got an epidural, which can be good if you're having a long labor and you need to kind of rest, but for me, it just slowed my labor down. So then they had to give me Pitocin, which is a synthetic hormone. Your body naturally produces oxytocin, but Pitocin makes contractions hurt even worse than they normally naturally should. So then I was in more pain.
Explain to a man what a contraction feels like. For all my guys that are listening, give me a male example of what a contraction feels like. I'm just curious.
I've heard men say, well, I had a gallstone or kidney stone, and I heard it's like the closest a man can get to childbirth. And I just laugh, and I go, well, you can think that. That's fine. It's worse than that, because I know women who have had kidney stones and babies, and they're like, it's not even close. You can't describe it.
Have you seen those electric things they put on men that shock you?
Oh, yeah. They can't handle it for 2 seconds. I mean, listen.
We'll do an episode where I put one of those on.
Well, I think that's a great idea.
And I take it off right
I
after
think it's
the
a
first
great
one.
idea.
Nope, I'm done.
But women are strong. That is definitely one thing I learned from going through childbirth. That is for sure. And you can handle it. Like, that's one thing that I think society and culture lies to women and says birth is scary, birth is not normal, and they treat you as a sick patient in the hospital, and birth hurts too much, you're not going to be able to handle it. Girl, you're going to cave, you're going to want your epidural, this and that. Let the woman decide for herself. Some women need an epidural to rest, and other women are listen, I'm going to do it, I'm going to try my hardest, and everybody, at the end of the day, if you have a healthy, happy baby, well, that's the most important thing. Right? We can all agree on that. But I think there are repercussions to medical intervention, because in my situation, it prolonged my labor. It was intense. It was traumatic. There were some things that happened that the doctor did that I didn't want him to do, but I didn't know otherwise. And the healing process afterwards was very hard and very difficult and very long, and it affected me emotionally. A lot of women get postpartum depression because of the trauma. And so I said, I'm never doing that again. And then when I got pregnant with my second, I decided to go completely the opposite direction and go full hippie, as I call it, and go all natural everything. Get a midwife, get a doula, eat a certain way, exercise, do prenatal stretching every single day, all the things. Take the herbal supplements. And I had a home birth with my second at home in a birthing pool with my midwife. And
all right, stop right there for a second. So, because I'm going to talk as a guy.
Yeah.
So you brought a pool into your house
it's a
to
birthing
have a
pool.
baby in a pool.
It's small.
Explain that to me.
So,
Because I heard it's incredible.
it is.
For the people I've done, it just seems so bizarre. But
Well, water.
who's the first one to thought of that, by
Okay.
the way?
I have no idea, but think about water. Okay, water is relaxing, especially warm water. You get in
Yeah,
jacuzzi.
True.
What happens when you go to jacuzzi? You just relax. When you get older and you have like bad knees and joints, what's the exercise they recommend? Swimming, because it takes the weight off. So not only are you relaxing your body, so you can, when you're relaxed, you open up more, baby comes faster. That's just the way that it works. Without going too
Does it
much
reduce
detail,
the pain of the contractions?
it
too?
reduces the pain of contractions.
So how hot's the water?
I don't know the exact
You put like
temperature.
suds in there and stuff? And
Yeah,
have
no,
candles
you don't want suds. It can't be like a jacuzzi. It's like body temperature ish.
Okay.
It's like 98 to 100 degrees or something. And it relieves the pain, it relieves the pressure, and it's just comforting, it's soothing. And when the baby's born, they can be underwater when they first come out because they actually don't take a breath till they hit the oxygen hits their nose. So
Oh,
it's safe. People are like, isn't the baby drowning when they come out underwater?
that was my next question.
No. They come out, they will not inhale air until their
They
nose
know it.
senses the oxygen.
Wow.
So they're still using their in utero breathing methods underwater. I know it sounds weird. It's a pool in your house, but trust me, it's amazing. I'll just
Well,
say
we
that.
have bathtubs in our house. So
Yeah. And
just-
it's not a bathtub, it's bigger than that. So you have some room to kind of wiggle around. Some people bring their whole family, husband, kids in the pool. I was like, I don't need anybody else in my water right now. This is just me. So everyone's different like that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't there when you had.
You were not. I did not want many
Yeah.
people watching that. Especially my dad.
Okay, I wonder how many of you. By the way, I haven't asked you to comment, but I am interested. How many of you have given birth by having either a doula or a midwife? How many of you have had a home birth? How many of you have had a home birth with a pool? I'm just really interested, and I'd like to know how those of you who had your children in a hospital or at home or in a pool, how many hours were you in labor? That'd be an interesting thing to find out. And send me your comments below. So if someone's interested in this, maybe they're just planning on what their options are. How do they go about finding one? How do they hire them? How do they decide if they should go to the hospital, if they can't have it at home? Help them make decisions of what they would do.
So word of mouth is the biggest way to find a good healthcare provider I have found. I found my midwife because I had friends that had done home births. She didn't have a website or didn't advertise or anything. She'd just been around doing it for a while. And so they recommended her. And then you will set up an initial interview. So you will interview the midwife, but she's also going to interview you because she needs to know, first of all, do I need to risk you out? Are you high risk? Because if you're high risk, we can't do a home birth. Secondly, why do you want to do a home birth? Some women want to do it just because of insurance or because they don't trust hospitals or doctors. And like the reasons behind it need to be the right reasons too, because the point of having it at home is to be as comfortable and relaxed and feeling as safe as possible. If you have a home that you don't feel safe in, maybe you shouldn't be having your birth at home. There's also birth centers too, which is another option. It's not a hospital, but there are nurse midwives there and they set it up. So it's kind of like a bed and breakfast sort of deal where you can have your own room and your own bathtub and you can give birth in a birth center. So there's that in between stage. But ask around. You can look online, look for reviews, make sure that you know how many births they've done. Are they certified? Are they a CPM? Are they a CNM? Are they licensed in the state? They'll have you sign certain waivers. There should be lots of paperwork. And you guys should be on the same page. And most importantly, you have to like them and trust them. Because the relationship between a woman and her midwife, it's different than a woman and her doctor. you can text your midwife at all hours of the night and ask her questions and send her pictures, and she's going to be in your home. You want to trust her. She's going to be a part of your life, and it's just, she's going to educate you so that you can educate, or she's going to give you the information so you can educate yourself. She's not going to just tell you. That's what holistic medicine is. It's not saying this is what you should do. It's saying here are all the options. And my teacher says, if you're a good teacher, no one will ever know what your actual opinion is on the matter. You tell them the pros and the cons, the risks and the benefits. And then if they ask, what would you do? What do you recommend? Then you can go down that road. But the point is to give women the resources so they can choose what is best for them in their situation. So yeah, I mean, Google's a great place to start.
Yeah. Now, what you also, you began as a photographer, Danny Mac Photography. You also you are still a pastor, and you are considering doing photography of
birth photography.
Birth photography. So explain how that works.
Well, I didn't realize that birth photography was like a weird thing that nobody had heard of until recently.
It's like midwifery for me.
Yeah. And midwives have been around forever. And of course, that's not like a term that people use quite as often anymore. Birth photography, for me, it's a way to see as many births as possible. You have to attend and observe a lot of births in order to become a certified professional midwife. And sometimes the room can be a little crowded and women don't want a lot of people in the room. But if you offer free photography or reduced price photography of this event for them, then you get to observe birth. And it's so important. It's just like when you're going to med school, you want to be there. You want to be seeing as many patients. They tag along with the doctors to see every possible thing that can go wrong or everything that could go right. And then the plus side is you are just capturing a beautiful moment in a family's life. Now, a lot of women are like, yeah, share my pictures all over the internet. I want the world to see. Others are more private and they want it just for themselves. But some of the greatest photos I've ever seen are birth photos, like when the baby is just coming out or when the parents see the baby for the first time. Just the facial expressions are, I mean, it beats wedding photography any day. Like those are great. Those are great photos too. But there's nothing like the face of a mom and dad when their baby is first born.
That's true.
I wish I would have had
shock and horror and amazement and joy and happiness. And,
shock, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How am I
lots
gonna
of
take care of
tears.
this baby?
Oh, you're not thinking that at that moment. Or maybe you were. I don't know. When I was born.
I don't make enough money.
You were like
I need another
19
job.
or whatever.
I know. We were young. We did it young. How do people are going to have questions, and how do they reach you? Do you mind telling us how people could reach you if they had more questions about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a midwife yet. I'm a student midwife still, so I'm still learning. But I have a great teacher, and I'm on a great team here in Montana. So, yeah, ask away. I love talking about it. I could talk about it forever. And any questions you have, I've experienced it myself. I've been through birth 3 times, and I've helped a lot of women through it as well. So I would say I could, well, I don't want to give out like my email to everybody.
No, but here's what we'll do. I'm going to put some links at the bottom that Danielle's going to give me. And those links will be places you can go to find out more information, find out how to find a midwife. And if you wanted to, give some kind of a general email for them to contact you, you can do that. So let's just leave it at that. I'll put some links down below, and you can look it up. And if you have any questions or comments, send it to us, and we can get it to her for an answer. Because most of my folks are watching this from California, and she's in Montana. So do you know how many states allow midwives to practice?
Most all of them, with the exception of about 7, I think. Okay. So, and honestly, I'm really not sure why those states are still kind of holding their fist closed as far as home birth. There is that misconception that it's dangerous, and it can be if you don't have someone who knows what they're doing. So that's why it's important to vet your midwife and to make sure you're low risk. But the most recent study they did on home births, actually, I think it was early thousands. I don't remember the exact dates, but they studied 30,000 home births or something like that. And I think there was 89.2% of the births that they planned to have at home stayed at home. And the others that transferred, the other percentage that transferred to a hospital, the biggest reason, the biggest percentage of why was because of maternal exhaustion. The mom was tired. She'd been laboring forever. And she just wanted to go to hospital, get an epidural to be able to take a nap, rest, and then have the baby safely. So really, if you have good prenatal care, if your midwife knows what they're doing and her team is certified and licensed and knows exactly what they're doing, it is just as safe as a hospital. And maybe some doctors will hate me for that. I had some videos removed because I said that, but the studies are out there. Your body is doing what it's naturally supposed to be doing. The less you interfere, and that's a midwife's motto, the less you interfere, the more your body will do what it's supposed to do naturally. The more medical intervention that you have when it's not needed, the faster things can go downhill. So I love doctors, nothing against doctors and hospitals. But I just, that myth is something that will make people, like you said, Jim Gaffigan, oh, you're having a home birth, so you want your baby to die. Yeah. Well, that's just not the way that it is.
And by the way, we, How in the World podcast was designed so we can have alternate opinions of things and have a safe place and to do this. So I'm sure I'll have some, and I know doctors and nurses that may have different opinions. I do have an interesting question though.
Sure.
Doctors are not just men. Nurses are not just women. Are midwives just women? Are there male midwives?
Well, yes.
What do they call them?
Manwives. No, I'm kidding.
Men?
No, technically it's mostly women. But there are, for example, in California, Southern California, there's this amazing doctor. His name is Dr. Stu Fishbein. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And he's a medical professional. He's a doctor, but he does home births for women who are high risk in breech delivery, which is when the baby's butt first, and twin delivery, which typically you do twins in the hospital. But he has this whole program called Reteach the Breech, and him and his team of midwives, they do home birth for women who otherwise would be risked out in the hospital. And he's amazing, and he's taught some courses at the school that I'm at, and my mentor knows him personally. And I mean, he's the only one that I know that does that, but he will go to the woman's home and he has his team of midwives and he gets in there and he helps these women to deliver babies at home that most doctors would say, heck no, no, that's not happening. So there's probably more Dr. Stews out there in this country that I know of, certainly in other countries, I'm sure. I don't think he'd call himself a mid-man or anything, but he's Dr. Stu. He's a doctor.
Just an interesting thought.
Yeah. It's possible. I don't know how many women would want that, but that's, I mean.
Well, here's my next question for those that are considering this, maybe being a midwife. How do you get paid? How do you support yourself? What does a midwife make? And how do you make money at all?
Well, it's kind of like med school. You don't get paid for a long time. And then you start, being able to make money once you're educated. You would probably, your apprenticeship and your schooling and everything could take between 2 to 8 years. It depends how long you want to take, how quickly you can find an apprentice and be at births and things like that. Once you are licensed and you have your own practice or you're working at another practice with other midwives, I know in the state of Montana, the average median price that a midwife charges is around $6,400. So, I mean, it's cheaper than a hospital birth. They do take.
What does it cost for a hospital birth now?
I don't know. I just remember I got a bill after my hospital birth. It was like $30,000.
Wow.
I mean, insurance pays for most of it, you would hope. But think of all the drugs that they give you and then the people that come in and the food. So it varies. In California, like Southern California, it's like $8,000 to $10,000. But that's for prenatal care. That's for the labor. That's for postpartum care. That's for the materials, all that kind of stuff. So some insurance will pay for it. Some won't. Some will pay part. Like our insurance paid for half and then we paid cash. But I think it's worth it if you are low risk and you feel like that's the right choice for you. I think it's a really good investment in your future and the health of you and your baby.
So then what is the training cost? How much? It's like 3 years, you said?
The training varies too. I mean, it depends. There are universities you can go to.
A student loan for that? Or does it have to be paid cash? How does that work?
Well, there are schools of midwifery, which is just like going to a university. So then you could get a student loan for that if you wanted. Those are much more expensive. You can do, mine is a smaller school. And so we pay for classes kind of as we take them. And it's much more affordable. That's part of the reason why I chose it. Plus it's a missionary Christian-based organization too. So we go about it. The teaching is really about what God intended with pregnancy and birth and all that kind of stuff. So that really varies. It could be from total education of $10,000 to $100,000. Depends where you go. There are some midwifery schools that are very expensive. So
you should try to do a few blogs on your experience so that people who are interested, who watch this, can kind of watch that process, how it goes. Because you're not doing this alone. You're married. You have 3 daughters. Tell us about your family a little bit. What your husband's doing and what your plans are and how old your girls are.
So
by the way, they've done a couple of guest appearances on my morning 7:47 show, and I get my most views when I have my granddaughters on. So
they're pretty adorable.
I just use them as happy.
My girls are really excited they love all the midwifery stuff too.
Yeah.
We've watched so many videos of ladies giving birth, and I think it's important to normalize birth so that your young girls are not petrified and scared of it when it comes time for them if they choose to have babies. My husband's a pastor. We just moved here to Bozeman, Montana from Van Nuys. It's in Los Angeles. And he's going to be getting a pastor job here soon. And I'm going to be pursuing midwifery and probably homeschooling the girls. I'm not sure yet what's happening there, but Lucy's 11. She'll be in middle school soon. And then Jubilee's almost 9 and Lavender is 6. And they're awesome. And we love it here. It's wonderful. Awesome. It's far from home, but.
From where's home?
Fresno. Well, California.
Yeah.
Fresno, LA.
Both of reminder where home was. By the way, we had a beautiful snowstorm today. It was kind of fun to have the snow right after Easter. So give a final word of encouragement to those that are, again, listening. And by the way, again, comments, questions. If you have follow-up guests you want me to have with what Danielle said, let me know in the comment section. We will consider all those requests. But to give them a final, this is how I want to lead this conversation.
I think just an encouragement to the women out there who are hearing this and are interested or intrigued or even, offended. I've had a lot of people that have said, giving birth naturally, that you should just say the words unmedicated, not naturally. And that's just semantics at this point. What I really want to get across to women is that I got into this because I think women should support women in this journey. It's so important. That's how it's been done for generations. That's why women knew how to help deliver babies, is because some woman in their life poured into them, showed them what to do, supported them, walked alongside them. This is no small thing. I mean, you are growing another human. That's amazing, but it's a lot of work and it's hard and it can be traumatizing. And there's all sorts of things that go with that. So if you're a woman and you are thinking about having a baby or you're pregnant, find some other women that you trust. Educate yourself, inform yourself, know all of your options, know all of your rights, whether you step into a hospital, you're in a birth center, or you're at home. There's really no wrong way to do what you feel is right for your body in this season. Because some women just know, like I have friends that say, I know I'm going to the hospital, I'm getting my epidural, it was great last time, and that's what I'm doing this time, no complications. Who is anybody to say that's a bad idea? Do I feel like I believe in natural birth? I do. I believe our bodies are strong enough to do it. I believe they can do it. I believe they were made to do it. However, I think that the most important thing we can do, whether it's about where we give birth, how we give birth, if we breastfeed, if we do formula, if we sleep train, if we don't, that we as women need to stop judging each other, support each other, help each other, educate each other, inform each other in the best possible way. And at the end of the day, it's just really about midwifery, being with women, being together. I want my daughters to know that it's a powerful thing. It's a miraculous thing. Your body was made to create life. That is no small thing. And what I learned about myself through all of it was that I am very strong, that if I put my mind to it, I can handle the pain. I can do the hard thing. Do that hard thing. We are resilient, and God made us to do this. So I think I would just encourage women to not be afraid, to find women that support them. And if you're going to be shamed for any of your decisions as a pregnant woman, then that's not the woman that should support you. So yeah, that was kind of a little bit long of a soliloquy, but I'm very obviously passionate about it. And I just saw how much change it made in my life to have my daughters at home with a team that I trusted and that supported me. And I remember after one of my births, my mother-in-law would always remind me, she said, you came out of that birth and you said, I don't know why they call it labor. That wasn't hard. That was beautiful. Now, let me just say, it hurt. I'm not saying it didn't hurt, but you're so high on the natural hormones and so amazed at how powerful you are and what your body just did, that really nothing else matters. And it's a beautiful thing. So I just want other women to be able to experience that and not live their life feeling like they are suffering trauma from something that they weren't prepared to deal with or people weren't supporting them.
That's good. Good. Well, thank you, Danielle, for taking time out of your crazy schedule, doing my How in the World podcast. I think it's been very informative, and I'm excited to hear your stories also. Please send us your stories below, give us your links, and we would love to continue this conversation. You know, we have many things that we're considering today with health and wholeness, and a lot of new ideas are coming to light, and people aren't just looking at one idea anymore. And so thank you, Danielle, for taking that time. I think you should do a couple podcasts of your experience and some of the wild and crazy things you go through as you learn, so other people can watch it and kind of take the journey with you.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And I'll see you next time on How in the World podcast. Keep sending us your suggestions because we're going to have a lot of great guests coming in the future. Bye-bye.
Hey, Renee M. Charest here. I hope you liked it, and there's plenty more to come on this channel. Make sure you click to subscribe and like and share. Go ahead. Click to subscribe. Now. Just do it. That little thing in the corner. Click it. Oh, forget it. I'm out of here.